We're back with another training camp update here. We're going to talk through three main subjects. First, we're going to hit on the Miami Dolphins and that short yardage rushing attack that they struggled with tremendously in their first preseason game. Talk a little bit about why that is and how they can fix it. Secondly, we're going to talk a little bit about sacks and the detriment that sacks cause when quarterbacks take sacks and how much they can control. And the third aspect, we're going to talk a little bit about home field advantage. Some of the undervalued teams at home field advantage that you should know entering the 2025 NFL season. So great show in store for you guys. Sit back, let's get into it. All right, so the Miami Dolphins, I think we all saw it. They struggled massively down near the goal line. They had 3 rushing attempts with 2 or fewer yards to go, and they couldn't gain any traction against the Chicago Bears over the weekend. And it got me to looking at the film of those runs and noticed that they're running out of heavy personnel pretty much on all of those runs. So I went back and looked. We know that the Miami Dolphins have struggled the last couple of years in short yardage situations. They struggled everything running the football last year, but especially in short yardage situations in 2024. So the last 2 years combined, the Miami Dolphins lead the NFL in short yardage runs out of 21 personnel. With 1 to 2 yards to go, 43% of their runs are out of 21. That ranks number 1 in the NFL. And there's only one other team who's above 18%. So that just shows you the scale as to how much higher the Miami Dolphins are above all of these other teams running the football out of those heavier personnel groupings with a fullback out on the field. 2 wide receivers, that's more like 21, 12 personnel. That's what the Miami Dolphins love, is the 21 personnel. But here's the thing. They are absolutely horrible running the ball out of these telegraphed short yardage runs. Their favorite 21 personnel, they rank 23rd in EPA, 25th in success rate, and 20th in yards per carry. But when they run from spread personnel, in 11 personnel, 3 receivers on the field, get the defense to spread out, lighten that box a little bit, the Miami Dolphins over the last 2 years combined, number 1 in EPA, number 2 in success rate, and number 1 in yards per carry. Can you believe that? From one of the worst in the NFL to the very best rushing attack in short yardage, when they do so out of 11 personnel. If you look at the exact efficiency numbers, 2 or fewer wide receivers out on the field, so they're adding an extra fullback or an extra tight end. Number 31 in EPA at minus 0.30. Number 31 in success at 42%. And 21st in yards per carry at 2.6. But when they run from 3+ wide receivers, number 1 in EPA at plus 0.46, up from minus 0.3. Number 5 in success at 67%, up from 42%, and number 1 in yards per carry at 5.5, up from 2.6. Now, if you want to only look at last year, we can look at only last year. I parsed those numbers out as well. In 2024, with 2 or fewer wide receivers out on the field, which they use at the highest rate of any team in the NFL, they rank dead last in EPA, dead last in success rate, and number 28 in yards per carry on 41 different attempts. That's a ton of attempts in 1 to 2 yards to go. And they were the worst rushing team in the NFL when they're using that extra fullback out on the field. But when they used 3+ wide receivers last year when they were terrible in heavy personnel, they ranked number 1 in EPA, number 1 in success, and number 10 in yards per carry running the football with 3 wide receivers. So now we go to the 2025 preseason. What do we see? The Dolphins had 6 running back runs with 1 to 2 yards to go. Needing 1 to 2 yards to go, 6 running back runs. Want to take a guess as to how many of those came with their 2 wide receiver sets and an extra fullback or tight end out there? All 6. They used that heavier personnel grouping on all 6 of these short yardage runs. You want to know the total yardage they gained on 6 running back runs needing 1 to 2 yards to go? 0 yards. 0 yards on 6 running back rushing attempts combined. That is absolutely pathetic. And it's part of the reason why the Miami Dolphins are struggling. Now, they can have success. They're not going to be able to change their offensive line. They're not going to be able to change the running back room dramatically at this stage in the preseason. But how can they have success? they need to utilize more 11 personnel on these short yardage runs. Why are the heavier personnel groupings failing? Well, when they're in their heavier personnel groupings with 1 to 2 yards to go, they're running the ball 75% of the time. And as a result, the defense is playing with 7 or more man boxes 95% of the time on those snaps. So the Dolphins bring in their extra fullback. The defense knows it's very likely a run is going to be coming. They stuff the box with defenders, and the Dolphins gain no traction. Their offensive line, which is not a good line, is not able to get the push or open up run lanes for their running backs. However, when they use their 11 personnel grouping, the defense does not decide to put 7+ men in the box nearly as often. They use 7+ box defenders only 31% of the time. And that allows the limited Miami Dolphins offensive line to actually gain push and to open up holes so that their running backs have substantially more success, the number one best success in the NFL. So this is something, it's clear, it's obvious. The numbers certainly bear it out that over the last 2 years, they've been vastly more effective utilizing 11 personnel. A lot of teams around the NFL, that is what they use in short yardage. Do not color this as, oh, well, of course they'd be better in 11 personnel, but no team uses that. If you look, teams like the Rams or the Falcons or the Buccaneers, those 3 offenses last year, they used 11 personnel as their base offense to run the ball in short yardage situation. Over 60% of their short yardage running back runs came from 11 personnel. The NFL average is right around 50%. It's just a hair below 50%. The Miami Dolphins are down at 20%. Instead, they're the number one highest rate of utilizing these heavier personnel groupings, but they're the worst offense in the NFL when they run out of these heavier personnel groupings. They use the light personnel, the 11 personnel, at one of the lowest rates in the league, but they're the best at it. It makes no sense. They need to try to spread the field and run, and then maybe utilize the heavier personnel and choose to pass out of those groupings to catch the defense off guard once they've loaded the box. But this predictability, it's for the birds. The Miami Dolphins did it in 2023, it failed. Did it in 2024, failed miserably. And started off the season in 2025, this preseason game against the Bears, doing it once again on all 6 of their short yardage runs, and it failed miserably yet again. This is coaching. I've defended Mike McDaniel at times. This is coaching. This is correctable. It's something very easy to fix. Let's see if they try to utilize 11 personnel to run the ball in short yardage a little bit more frequently in 2025. All right, next topic. I want to talk a little bit about quarterbacks and their ability to elude being sacked and escape pressures, because this is a skill and sacks are often on the quarterback. We used to always think sacks are on the offensive line. It's an offensive line stat. It's actually more so a quarterback stat than we once thought initially. But it's also a quarterback skill how to avoid that pressure. It's a skill to avoid the pressure ahead of time. Throw the ball before pressure actually gets to you. We know once a quarterback is pressured, all of their efficiency metrics will decline. So the goal is to get rid of the football before pressure arrives. However, if you are pressured, it is absolutely a skill to avoid being sacked. And some quarterbacks have done much better over the last couple of years than other quarterbacks. And I shared a list on social the other day. And part of this I talk about in my book, which, by the way, this book, the 586-page 2025 football preview, this thing is available on Amazon, or you can get the PDF version up at sharpfootballanalysis.com, or just go to sharp.football. That'll get you to the sales page where you can get this book, and we'll do a discount. I'm going to tell the guys we're going to use Save 50. Save 50, that'll get you 50% off this book right now. 50% off. There is no better way to get ready for the 2025 NFL season than utilizing this 32 team chapters, going through every single team in tons of detail. Very easy to digest, ton of information. You're going to love it. But at any rate, we talk a little bit about this in the book, Sack Avoidance. Let me list off some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at avoiding sacks. Josh Allen, over the last 2 years, the single best quarterback at avoiding sacks. Only 10.9% of the time he is pressured does he actually take a sack. The rest of those opportunities, he's escaping, he is avoiding being sacked. Another quarterback, Jordan Love. He's number 2 best in the NFL at avoiding sacks. Only 13.5% of the time when he is pressured is he getting sacked. Young quarterback, surprising quarterback, because Derek Carr is no longer playing football. Bo Nix is the number 3 best quarterback at avoiding being sacked when he is pressured. Jared Goff, another one, he's number 4. And rounding out the top 5, Patrick Mahomes, number 5. And we're talking about a lot of teams that are having a lot of success. Bo Nix, we'll see. He's obviously a first-year quarterback. But when Jordan Love is healthy, the Green Bay Packers always tend to have a winning record. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills, they've got the second most wins in the NFL over the last 5 years. Patrick Mahomes, obviously we know the best team in the NFL from a win-loss perspective and consistently in the AFC Championship and going to the Super Bowl. And then Jared Goff with the Detroit Lions. So yeah, all these quarterbacks, you could say they're good, but the fact of the matter is, this is a pretty critical statistic towards winning games, is avoiding taking sacks. Who are the quarterbacks that are the worst at this statistic? Well, Caleb Williams last year was the worst. Over the last 2 years, in fact, if you sum up all quarterbacks with at least 300 pass attempts, Williams is the worst. 32% of the time he's pressured, he is taking a sack. Think about that. That's basically 3 times more frequently than Josh Allen. So Josh Allen's the best, Caleb Williams is the worst. 3 times more frequently, he's taking sacks. I'm going to get to in a second why that's so horrible in terms of their upside and why they need to fix things in 2025. But that's a problem for Caleb, and it was a problem for him in college as well. Jaden Daniels, surprisingly enough, sitting there at 29.4%, second worst quarterback in the NFL. He was great at avoiding being pressured, but when he was pressured, he would sometimes make some good plays, right? Obviously, we're talking about close to 30% of the time he's sacked. 70% of the time, he might be making a great escape, a great play. But those sacks are problematic. They need to continue to try to reduce that for Jaden Daniels. Deshaun Watson, we're not talking about him this year, but he was 3rd worst. Daniel Jones, we'll see what ends up happening with him. This was a problem for him with the New York Giants. That offensive line was bad. He was getting pressured and he was taking too many sacks, 27.3%. And Zach Wilson, Will Levis, these guys aren't starters. The next closest guy was Drake May at 26.2%. Now, why is it important to avoid sacks? Well, here's some stats I just shared on Twitter. If you take 0 sacks on a drive the last 2 years combined, 40% of the time you score points. 25% of the time, those points, they're a touchdown. 2.2 points per drive on average, and only 32% of drives end with a punt. If you take even 1 sack on a drive, instead of scoring points on 40% of the drives, you're scoring points only 25% of the time. And instead of scoring touchdowns on 25% of the time, if you take a sack, that's down to 8%. And you're going to average, instead of 2.2 points per drive, 1.1. So knock it in half. And 51% of the time, you're going to end your drive with a punt if you take a sack. Whereas if you take no sacks, only 32% of the time will you end your drive with a punt. So we're talking a massive impact to the efficiency of an offense, to the ability to score points. Just taking 1 singular sack on a drive. It's a big deal. Avoiding sacks are massively important. This is a skill, and more quarterbacks need to figure out a way. If they're in a jam, if they're under pressure, and they can't figure out a solution to that, they got to just try to avoid getting sacked. Throw the ball away, scramble, something other than taking a loss on that play. Much bigger upside for your offense and your ability to score points. Last but not least, let's talk a little bit about home field advantage. We know that home field advantage isn't quite as impactful as it once was. Years past, teams weren't as adept with traveling. They weren't as adept with rest and recovery and player health and nutrition. And so it was harder to deal with travel. Now, teams are a little bit more adept with that, but there is still home field advantage. And one aspect of it that doesn't get discussed enough, we had our penalty expert, Joe Gibbs, write about for the website. His entire article listing all 32 teams and where they rank based on home field advantage is up on sharpfootballanalysis.com right now. I highly encourage you to go check it out. Search on Google, Sharp Football Analysis, Home Field Advantage 2025 if you want to, but it's a massively important statistic here. Let's talk about some of them. I'm going to give you the top 5 teams and the number 32 team. This is based on Joe Gibbs' analysis. Number 1, pretty surprising, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now look at this. When they play at home, and this study, just by the way, goes from 2018 through 2024 and pulls out 2020 when there were no crowds, which we'll talk about momentarily. But this team won 64% of their games at home and only 50% of their games on the road. That is a massive difference since 2018. They're the number 1 team in NFL home field penalty advantage, with 43% of opponent penalties being offensive pre-snap or offensive holding. Pittsburgh not only ranks number 1 in raw numbers for both home field penalty advantage and generating pre-snap and holding penalties, but they did so in convincing fashion. So Pittsburgh, big edge in terms of the way that opponents are getting penalties called against them, thanks to in part the crowd, thanks to in part the situations that they're in, the environment, and that's part of the reason why Pittsburgh's home record is so much better than their road record. Second team, this is no surprise to me. The Kansas City Chiefs, Arrowhead Stadium, the number 1 team in the NFL for home versus road penalty per game average. So again, the Chiefs win no matter where they are, but look at some of these stats for the penalties. The Chiefs rank 6th overall in net penalty advantage versus visiting opponents since the start of the 2018 season. A key contributor to that was ranking number 2 as a net beneficiary of unnecessary roughness and roughing the passer penalties at home. This is a team that is definitely getting an advantage at home, and it's helping them win games, and these penalties are a big part of that. Now, Joe did go back and looked all the way back to 2013, beyond and well before Patrick Mahomes, and are they getting all the calls? And since Andy Reid came there, this has been something that the Kansas City Chiefs have benefited from when they play at home, is that more teams commit offensive penalties or roughing the passer penalties against the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback for a long time now. So there's just something inherent with Andy Reid's offense and the edge that this stadium brings from a raucous crowd environment and getting on the refs and encouraging there to be penalties, things that home field atmosphere can bring. And look no further than the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles, since 2018, 66% win rate at home, 54% win rate on the road. They are the number 3 team at generating offensive pre-snap or holding penalties on their opponent. Further validating the impact of venue and fan base were subpar penalty numbers minus the home crowd in 2020. So they went from number 3 best down to below average when they didn't have that home crowd influencing things in 2020. They saw a decline in beneficial offensive pre-snap and offensive holding infractions compared with team averages in the surrounding seasons. And then I went back and looked at 2020. The Philadelphia Eagles were 3 wins, 4 losses, and 1 tie at home, so below 500. They are 38-17 in all their other years since 2018, besides that year where the crowd wasn't there. That's 69% win rate. So they dropped from 69% win rate in all other years to below 500 in 2020 without that crowd. It's hard to play in Philadelphia, and they win a lot of games there. Green Bay Packers, Lambeau Field. This is another good one. Listen to this. This team at home is 45-15. That's 75% since 2018. But on the road, they aren't even 52%. They're 51.7%. Based on our penalty numbers, these are Joe's obviously, unconscious bias from officiating crews is at peak level when they are assigned to games in Green Bay, making Lambeau one of the most challenging venues for visiting teams to operate in. The Lambeau mystique takes over. That, along with the crowd and weather-related obstacles, ensures Green Bay will always be one of the premier home field advantages in the NFL. And then we've got the Cleveland Browns. This one is obviously very surprising to me. But listen to these numbers with the team at home versus on the road. At home, the Cleveland Browns are 33-22. That's 61% wins. On the road, they're 19-41. That is 31%. Dropping from 61% at home down to 31% on the road. That is massive. That is the largest home versus road win percentage discrepancy of any team in the NFL. And the catalyst, according to Joe, from a penalty perspective, was that Cleveland ranked 7th at generating offensive pre-snap and offensive holding infractions on opposing defenses. Now, the last place team in this category, the worst home field advantage, I'm going to shut up for a second. I want you to think. Any ideas? The answer is the New York Jets. The New York Jets are the worst home field advantage in the NFL from a penalty perspective. That's not really a shocker. That stadium is terrible. MetLife Stadium, and the New York Jets haven't put out a good product there. And the fans don't get into the games. It's not helping their situation at all. So if you want to know if your team's not top 5 or dead last, if I didn't mention them already and you want to know where they are, head on over to sharpfootballanalysis.com. Check out the penalty analysis right there. If you want to look at these stats and incorporate them into any of your models, feel free to do that. All the information is there with a lot of research put into it by our very own Joe Gibbs. And with that, I want to remind you, you can get the 2025 football preview, 585 pages worth on 32 team chapters up at Sharp Football Analysis. Go to sharp.football, enter the code SAVE50, and you'll get 50% off the purchase price of the PDF. Do it now. We'll be back soon.